I never expected to be caught off guard in my own home, especially not by my 55-year-old stepmother, Vanessa. Moving back in with my dad and his new wife was supposed to be temporary, a way to save money after college before I found my own place. Dad had remarried while I was away, and Vanessa, with her infectious laugh and graceful elegance, wasn't what I had expected. It was a quiet Wednesday morning. I had just stepped out of the shower, preparing for an important job interview. The mirror was fogged, and I could feel my nerves buzzing as I mentally rehearsed my answers. That's when I heard a soft knock on the bathroom door. "Damien, are you in there?" Vanessa's voice was gentle but filled with warmth. "Yeah, just finishing up," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my pulse quickened. There was a slight pause. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I need something from the bathroom. Do you mind?" I didn't think much of it. "No problem, come in," I said, wiping the steam off the mirror. The door creaked open, and Vanessa stepped in, wearing a soft, ivory robe that flowed around her like a delicate breeze. I assumed she'd quickly grab whatever she needed and leave, but as she reached into the cabinet, her robe slipped slightly. It wasn't much, just a glimpse of her bare shoulder, a smooth line of skin, but it was enough to make my breath catch. I forced myself to look away. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Vanessa smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Just a little headache," she said, holding up a bottle of aspirin. "Are you nervous about your interview?" "A bit," I admitted, trying to steady my breathing and ignore how her robe seemed to be hanging precariously. She always had this calm, magnetic energy that drew people in. And right now, it was pulling me in ways I didn't expect. "You'll do great," she said, her voice a soft reassurance. "Just be yourself, Damien. You've got everything they're looking for." As she turned to leave, the belt of her robe came undone, and in a heartbeat, it slipped off her shoulders, falling open completely. For a second, time froze. Vanessa, my stepmother, stood before me, her skin glowing in the soft light, fully exposed. Her eyes widened in shock as she hurriedly pulled the robe back around her, her face flushed. "Oh God, Damien, I'm so sorry," she stammered, fumbling with the belt. I turned away, heart racing. It's fine," I managed to say, trying to make sense of the heat coursing through me. "It was an accident." "Yes, just an accident," she echoed, still tying the robe with shaky hands. "Please, don't say anything to your father. He'd be so upset." "Of course," I said, my mind spinning. "Our secret." She slipped out of the bathroom, leaving me standing there, leaning against the sink as if the room had tilted. I couldn't believe what had just happened. For the rest of the day, my thoughts kept returning to that moment, the sight of her and the look in her eyes, a mixture of shock, maybe even something else. Something unspoken. That evening, I avoided Vanessa as much as I could. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable, but every time she entered the room, I could feel the air grow thick with tension. She acted like nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the images from my mind. That night, lying in bed, all I could do was replay that morning over and over. It was maddening. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen table. Simple, direct, "Damien, we need to talk." My heart pounded as I read the words. What did she want to talk about? Was this about clearing the air, or was there something more? I grabbed the note, crumpling it as my mind raced. I needed to prepare myself for whatever was coming. That evening, the smell of roasted vegetables filled the house as I walked into the kitchen. Vanessa stood by the stove, dressed in a silky blouse that accentuated her graceful figure. She turned, offering a soft smile. "I made dinner." "I thought we could talk after," she said, her voice calm, but there was an undercurrent of something unresolved. We ate in near silence, the small talk barely enough to cover the tension. I couldn't focus on anything but the moment looming ahead. When the plates were cleared, Vanessa finally sat down, taking a deep breath. "Damien, about what happened yesterday," she started, her voice softer now. I didn't know how to bring this up, but we need to be honest with each other. I met her gaze, my chest tightening. Yeah, I've been thinking about it too. Vanessa leaned forward, her fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass. It wasn't just an accident. I mean, it was, but it made me realize that there's something more. Something between us. I've felt it for a while, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. My heart pounded. This was happening. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the vulnerability. I couldn't deny that I'd felt it too, this pull toward her. But she was married to my dad. I don't know what to say, I whispered. You're married to Dad, Vanessa. I know, she said, her hand reaching out to touch mine. Her fingers were warm, and that simple touch sent a shock through my body. I love him. But what I feel for you, it's different. It's like we're drawn to each other in a way that's hard to explain. I should have pulled away, stopped this before it went any further. But I couldn't. Instead, I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. Vanessa, Before I could finish, her lips met mine. Soft, hesitant at first, as if testing the waters. But then it deepened, the kiss breaking open the flood of emotions between us. All the desire, all the unspoken tension, it poured out in that moment. Nothing else existed. Not my dad, not the consequences. As the days passed after their conversation on the porch, the tension between Jason and Evelyn only grew heavier. They kept their distance, attempting to act normal around Richard, but the underlying desire between them lingered, unspoken but palpable. One evening, when Richard announced a business trip that would take him away for the weekend, Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. She knew what the weekend would bring, an empty house, the weight of unspoken feelings, and the magnetic pull between her and Jason. That night, after Richard left, the house felt almost too still. Evelyn tried to busy herself, but no amount of distractions could stop her mind from wandering back to Jason. She could feel him, sense him, even when they weren't in the same room. The memory of their kiss, the passion in his eyes, haunted her.
Hours passed, and the quietness of the night became too much. She found herself pacing in her room, her robe loosely tied around her body, the soft satin brushing against her skin. Before she could fully process what she was doing, she opened the door to find Jason standing there, his hand raised as if he was about to knock. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt thick with tension, unspoken words hanging in the silence. "Jason," Evelyn whispered, her voice betraying her nerves. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, his eyes locked onto hers, filled with a mix of uncertainty and undeniable desire. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. About us." Evelyn's heart raced. She had told herself to be strong, to keep things from spiraling further out of control, but standing this close to him made her resolve crumble. "I tried too," she admitted softly, her voice almost trembling, "but I can't fight it anymore." There was a pause, the weight of their mutual confession hanging in the air. Jason closed the distance between them, his fingers brushing her cheek softly. The simple touch sent a shiver through Evelyn, and she let out a shaky breath. "I can't stop thinking about you, either," he murmured. Before Evelyn could respond, Jason's lips were on hers, and this time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was urgent, full of the need and longing they had both tried to suppress. She felt her robe loosen, sliding from her shoulders as his hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, their bodies pressing together. Everything about the moment felt electric, overwhelming. Evelyn's hands roamed over Jason's chest, exploring the lines of his body as they fell back onto her bed. The passion between them ignited like a wildfire, there was no turning back now. Hours passed, their connection deepening in the night. Evelyn lay beside him, her heart still racing from everything they had done. She stared at the ceiling, the reality of their situation settling over her like a heavy weight. "We can't keep doing this, Evelyn," Jason whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "What if Dad finds out?" Evelyn turned on her side to face him, her fingers tracing soft patterns on his chest. "I know we shouldn't, but I can't deny what I feel for you, Jason." I've tried, but it's like something inside me is drawn to you, no matter how wrong it seems. Jason covered her hand with his, squeezing it gently. We're in too deep. This can't end well. Evelyn sighed, her heart aching with the weight of their impossible situation. I don't know what to do. I love your father, but with you, it's different. I've never felt like this before. They lay there in silence, the implications of their actions hanging between them. But no matter how wrong it was, no matter the risk, neither could bring themselves to walk away. By the time Sunday evening rolled around, reality was looming closer. Richard would be home soon, and the weekend they'd shared would be nothing but a dangerous memory. Evelyn sat up in bed, pulling the sheets around her. Jason, we have to make a choice. We can't keep living in this fantasy. Either we stop this now, or we face whatever comes next. Jason's eyes were filled with conflict, torn between his feelings for Evelyn and the loyalty he felt toward his father. What do you want? Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. I want you, Jason, but I don't want to destroy everything in the process. We have to be smart about this. Jason nodded, knowing she was right. We'll figure it out, but we need to be careful. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat in silence, knowing that whatever decision they made, their lives had already been irreversibly changed. Evelyn and Jason sat together, the evening light casting long shadows across the room. The weight of their choices pressed down on them, but neither could deny the pull that kept drawing them back together. Careful, Evelyn whispered, her hand lingering on Jason's arm, but honest. Jason turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of longing and uncertainty. Honest with ourselves, or with Dad? He asked quietly, knowing the answer already. Evelyn's heart clenched at the thought of Richard, the man she had once been devoted to but now felt so distant from. What she felt for Jason was raw, powerful, and undeniable, but it came with a cost. They both knew it. We can't keep this up forever, Evelyn, Jason said softly. It's only a matter of time before he realizes something's going on. We can't lie to him. She nodded, but her thoughts were in turmoil. Could they face the truth and survive it? Or was this something that would inevitably tear them all apart? Either way, the passion they shared wasn't something they could suppress any longer, and pretending otherwise felt like a cruel denial of what was real between them. I don't know how this will end, Jason, Evelyn admitted, her voice heavy with the weight of uncertainty. But for now, I need you. I can't let go of this. Jason's hand found hers, gripping it tightly. Neither can I, he replied, his tone filled with resolve. But we need to find a way, or else this will destroy everything. They sat together in silence as the last traces of daylight faded, both knowing that they were standing on the edge of something dangerous. Their bond was undeniable, and what they shared couldn't simply be forgotten. But how could they move forward without shattering everything around them? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence, and Evelyn's heart jumped in her chest. Richard was home. Jason stood up, looking at her with one last, lingering gaze, before stepping toward the door. We'll figure this out, he promised, his voice low but determined. We have to. Evelyn nodded, her breath shallow, the reality of what they had done weighing on her like a heavy storm cloud. As Jason left the room, she quickly straightened the sheets, trying to compose herself before Richard entered the house. But as she heard the door open and Richard's voice calling out to her, she knew deep down that this secret would not stay buried forever. What had begun as a fleeting moment of desire had spiraled into something far more dangerous, and there would be no easy way out. Evelyn forced a smile as Richard walked in, greeting him with a kiss that felt foreign, hollow. As they sat down for dinner, she caught Jason's eye across the table, and in that brief glance, everything was said without words. The ending to their story wasn't written yet, but the path they were on was one they could no longer control. And deep down, Evelyn knew that sooner or later, their secret would come to light, and when it did, none of their lives would ever be the same again.